One of the scariest experiences I've had as an EMT occurred during my first year on the job. We received a 911 call for a person down in the front yard of a residential address at approximately 8:30 a.m. When we got there, we noticed a woman lying face down in the front yard near a large tree. I went to grab the heart monitor as the paramedic and another firefighter were making their way to the woman. As I walked toward them, I noticed an older male open the front door of the house and walk out onto the open-air porch. I started walking towards him because I could see he had something on his face, which I thought might be blood. I got to the walkway leading to the steps of the porch, and I immediately stopped walking. The man, who appeared to be in his upper 60s, had severe trauma and bleeding to his lower face and jaw area. He had no shirt on, and he was trying to say something I couldn't understand. He was also holding something silver down by his side, in his right hand. I thought it was a knife at first, and I immediately told him to put the knife down. He was agitated and continued trying to yell. He turned to walk back into the house and then walked right back out. As I tried to focus in on his silver knife in his hand, I heard my captain yell, "Get behind the truck, he's shooting! Get back!" We all jumped up and ran behind the engine. I hadn't heard a gunshot or seen a gun. Then it dawned on me. It wasn't a knife. It was a gun. The police had been dispatched to the initial call as well and were just pulling up. They began interacting with the man from a distance as he still had the weapon in his hand. He was not raising it or pointing it. My partner and I ran to the woman. I attached the monitor. He looked at it and said, "As he stole," and began quickly moving her. We transported her, CPR in progress, to the nearest trauma center. Unfortunately, she did not survive. The man ended up going back in his house and barricading himself inside. The SWAT team and negotiators had to come out, and the whole ordeal took several hours. We later found out more of the story. The older man had shot his wife in the back as she was running away from him. He then put the gun under his chin and pulled the trigger, but not before he flinched ever so slightly. The bullet entered under his chin and exited near his nose. This was the cause of the severe facial trauma and agitation. I don't remember ever hearing if they found the motive or not. If you're confused about why my captain said he was shooting, I was too at the time. But what happened was that my captain, who rides in the passenger seat of the fire truck, got out of the rig and was facing the opposite side of the street. There were neighbors outside who heard and saw this man shooting, and they told him this. So naturally, walking up and seeing everything, he made the right decision to pull us all back because we had no idea. From the time we arrived on the scene to loading the patient in the ambulance was probably 5 minutes max. It wasn't really scary at the time. It was afterwards when it set in. The realization I was standing directly in front of a deranged man with a revolver in his hand, who obviously wasn't afraid to use it, was pretty eye-opening. And to get to that point from an initial dispatch for a person down in a yard at 8:30 in the morning, we get those calls daily and they're nothing major. In this case, we ended up in the middle of a murder-suicide gone wrong. I got the ever-loving shit beat out of me by a teensy 13-year-old girl. I was on rotation for ambulance duty and the plectron goes off at 2 in the morning or so. The fact it was a plectrum may tell you it was a while ago. If you've ever seen Emergency, you've heard the tones when their station gets a call. Anyway, not much information on the radio. Not a big surprise. I got to the station and heard that the police were there. Also, no surprise. It's 2 a.m. in the Valley View. You didn't have to do a lot. My partner was new. I had a couple of years' experience at that point, so he was going to drive. I was medically trained, so I take the back. At this point, I'm 2 years out of high school, a big-ass strapping guy. My partner was half my size. We get to the scene. Mom and Dad meet us and tell us that their daughter got home late and she's not right. Huh. Well, let's look at her. She's slow. Just slow. Pupil response, breathing, reactions, heartbeat, slow. Nothing obviously wrong with her other than that. But at the time, one of the things to do was put pills in a bowl. So did your guess. Then you grab something and you try it. Stupid, but I suspected she got into something depressing her. All I know for sure is that she's making me nervous and I want her in my ambulance. We load her up and I take the back. She's not responding verbally, but she does freak me out. I start her on oxygen and told the driver to go. The cop would escort. We're moving and I get on the radio to CMED to tell them what I've got and what we're doing. The radio is in a small recess above her head. I reach for the radio and she goes batshit crazy. Thrashing, screaming, biting, scratching, fighting. I'm way bigger than she is and I'm trying to get her in restraints. I'm trying not to hurt her. She's trying to kill me. Seriously. I was terrified. I screamed at my driver to get on the radio, get the cop back here, pull off and help me. We do that, she puts up a battle, but we restrained her and hauled ass. By the time we got to the ER, she was a scared little girl crying for mom, not a homicidal little demon bent on death. I walked in and the nurses began to look at me. I was dripping blood from my face and my damn right armpit, where she had bitten me deeply enough to need stitches while I was reaching over for the radio. I will never, ever forget that night. I don't know what her problem was, but she scared the hell out of me. For me, it was the first patient that died. She was about 50 and attending an event at a hotel ballroom. She was dancing on the floor and just dropped unconscious. When I arrived, people on the scene were already doing CPR. This was the first time I did CPR on an actual person. The floor was fairly slick and my knees slid out from under me for the first few times I tried to do chest compressions. We did CPR, defibrillated her, and inserted a comi tube. I remembered having trouble cutting through the underwire of her bra. In the movies, CPR patients always make it. At the last minute, just when it seems all hope is lost, they wake up and start breathing again. Not so for this lady. After the third time shocking her, it started to become apparent that she would not be coming back. We kept working on her for 40 minutes, but she never tried to breathe on her own. She never regained a pulse. She never showed any signs whatsoever. After the run was over, I got pretty hard on myself. I kept remembering falling down when trying to give compressions. Were my compressions deep enough? Fast enough? Did I screw this up and cause her to die? In the midst of all these other people reviewed the case and were asking me questions as well. I got paranoid. I thought the hotel would want a scapegoat if they got sued. I felt certain the company was trying to do the same thing. Hang me out to dry if a lawsuit should come. In the end, it took me a while to accept that I had done everything I could for her. It was just her time. Even at what is still a fairly young age, people can die. As a nurse in the ICU at the hospital I worked at around the year 2008, I had a patient who was a frequent patient to our unit, so I was familiar with his case. He was about 6 feet tall, with a shock of red hair. He was a young adult who had been fired from his job with EMS several months earlier after dropping a patient on his first day on the job. Ironically, in our unit while delivering a morbidly obese patient who was subsequently injured. This young man became very despondent, and I laid in his bed at his mother's house in one spot until he developed a very large open necrotic area on his hip, through the muscle tissue extending down his hip and into his groin. He was about 115 pounds, very underweight, a diabetic and a skeleton who dreaded the painful dressing changes that had to be done every 6 hours. His mother rarely left his side and performed his care at home when he was well enough at times to leave. Several of us nurses had eerie feelings about his mother. We documented some strange events. This patient had been receiving high-caloric feedings 24 hours a day to strengthen his body. His blood sugar levels measured every 2 hours and the appropriate amount of insulin given to him. He ate very little food and his sugar levels were remaining steady. However, at least once a week he could go into seizures, he would stop breathing, or he would code. Per protocol, we would check his blood sugar and it would be near zero, even though we had just checked it and gave him the appropriate amount of insulin. He would always be in his room with his mother every single time this happened. She was at times seen putting something away just prior to her calling out for help each time this occurred. We called Adult Protective Services several times in an attempt to save this young man. Each time their investigation yielded nothing as the son denied that his mother would be trying to kill him. However, he wanted to die, but would deny it to APS. Finally, his mother had him transferred to another hospital in our area. I saw in the newspaper shortly after that he died. One of our nurses also worked at this other hospital. He had died the exact same way. There was nothing we could do to save this young man. It's haunted me all this time. First of all, I'm an X-ray tech, not a doctor or a nurse. I worked at a U.S. Army hospital stateside. I was working a night shift and got a call that they needed to bring down a floor patient for some neck imaging. So they bring down this young guy, no older than 20, who's able to stand and talk and is very mobile. I'm curious, other than the young man being seemingly moody, nothing seemed wrong. So I start the typical questioning for military patients. What do you do for the Army? How long have you been in? Got any future plans? After only asking my first question, I saw he had been shot through the neck. The bullet had fragmented inside his neck and he had about 10 to 15 tiny pieces of bullet throughout his neck. He had a clear entrance and exit wound. The answer to my first and last question to him that night was he was an infantryman in the Rangers. After my patient left, I could not stop thinking about this poor kid. Not even old enough to buy a beer or a handgun. Got sent out to some third world hellhole and got shot through the neck. I couldn't get over the sheer horror he must have felt. He must have known he was going to die that day. After getting shot, seeing the blood spilling from his uniform, seeing his friends' faces, seeing the medic's face, all the assuring that he was fine with the panic in their voices, and all this for a little more than $2,000 a month in college money he was never going to use. And at some point, I imagine he started to wonder why he hadn't died yet. And then he just never did. He lived. Now he survived a war most people think is over and ending, and will get medically retired and have to live with his traumatic experience for the rest of his life. I don't think I will ever forget this soldier. I can't imagine the damage that happened to him mentally and physically, and how it will impact the rest of his life. My heart breaks for him, and I wish I could have helped him more. This young couple came back from their honeymoon late night from New Zealand. This young lady had gone for a bath at around 5:30 in the morning. Around 7:30 a.m. the husband woke up and searched for her, and they realized she was in the bathroom with the gas geyser on. They broke the door and found her on the floor with an altered sensorium. She suffered from carbon monoxide poisoning because of the gas geyser, and MRI is showing bilateral white matter changes because of the hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. These are technical terms, which means there is severe brain damage because of lack of oxygen supply to the brain. Now she is suffering from profound memory loss, and because of brain damage, instead of 27, her behavior is like a 7-year-old. P.S. Gas geyser poisoning is emerging nowadays. Please be careful while using it at home. Back when I was an intern, not so long ago, in a government hospital, a trauma case was wheeled in. A young man, identity unknown, was found on the railroad tracks with his hand severed. He had probably fallen off the train. The locals and the police had acted quickly and brought him to the nearest hospital. Us. In transit, they had done what they could to stem the blood flow, by trying rags around the stump and fashioning tourniquets out of cloth. By the time he reached us, the crude bandages had become soaked with blood and the tourniquets were all but useless. We didn't have a plastic surgeon or orthopedician, and so the patient had to be referred ASAP. But we had to stabilize the patient first. We removed the bandages only to reveal the crushed stump that had been a forearm an hour back. Intravenous access was established. High-flow fluids pumped in. As soon as we removed the tourniquet, the scene changed. The stump began shooting a jet of blood while the interns scrambled, desperately trying to stem the blood flow. All the while, the patient had not uttered a single word, silently observing the plethora of white coats working on him. The only sign of him being alive was the jet of blood rhythmically shooting from the stump. I had his head pinned down, trying to prevent him from getting up. I told him that he was going to be okay in all the languages that I knew. His eyes just rolled towards me. I would like to believe I saw a sense of relief come across them. That's when the police officer standing silently behind me tapped my shoulder and handed me a polythene bag. In it was a severed hand, hurriedly put on ice. Now I had to remove the limb and place it on fresh ice packs and pack it to be forwarded. I took up the severed hand in my hand in a sort of ill-thought handshake. The feel of a severed limb. It's different. The hand felt different, probably because it had no soul. That changed how I looked at life. We think it's the sight of blood that's the most terrifying. We never consider the smell, the stench of blood. That's what stays with you long after you've removed yourself from the situation. It stays with you when you bathe, when you eat, and even worse, when you sleep. And most importantly, that man's eyes. That haunts me even today, and probably will continue to, till the end of my time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, share it, all that good stuff. And if you want to help support what I do, debate on becoming a channel member or even a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video. And I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye. I'm a plumber in a rural area in the desert. I've been in this profession for about 40 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. But I was wrong. I got a call one day out to an old ranch. The caller reported that some pipes were busted, so it was urgent that I made my way out there. I packed up my stuff and immediately headed out. When I reached the address and knocked on the door, I was greeted by a very pleasant woman. She explained the urgency of the situation, and I went inside and found their issue. A big section of their main plumbing was going to need to be replaced. She mentioned that her husband was trying to split the main water line and get some water out to a mine they had in the mountains. I thought it was odd that they would try to do this even though they obviously had no experience. But whatever. Job security, I guess. I go turn off the main water line, and just as I'm standing up, I see someone staring at me in the distance. It looked like they were wearing a mask, but it was only like half of a mask, and it had giant bunny ears. Probably one of the weirdest and creepiest things I've ever seen. I go back inside and finish the work. Just as I finish up replacing their piping, I hear the front door open and someone walk inside. The footsteps continue through the house and stop right behind me. At this point, I was in the kitchen with the lady, going over the contracts and getting ready to collect the money. I turned around when I heard this person get behind me, and it was the same person who was staring at me off in the distance, still wearing this really weird mask. The lady pipes up and says that's her husband, says that he's not very friendly or talkative. I can't say I blame him. People are stupid. I extend my hand out in a greeting. "How you doing, sir? My name is Billy Bob Robb." He doesn't reach out his hand to return my handshake. I decide it's best to just get the money. I turn back to the lady and let her know that everything's taken care of, and that if they have any further issues, just give me a call. Just as the lady's handing me the check, I hear from behind me,
"I walk your big steel rod deep into my mysterious cavern."
That comment really caught me off guard. I assumed he meant he needed help getting water out to his mine, but the way he worded it was just weird. Not to mention his voice was like someone took a bunch of bumblebees and put them in a metal coffee can, slightly shook them up for about an hour, froze them and tied leashes onto them, defrosted them and brought them back to life, made them smoke 17 packs of cigarettes a day for 32 years, and then merging them into one super bee and making that a human. And that's about where I drew the line. I thanked them both for their business, walked out, drove away, and tried to avoid them. I made a note when I got back to the computers and put that I didn't want to work there again. Unfortunately, my business card had my cell phone number on it. Every day for 4 months, this guy would call and just say, "I walk your big steel rod deep into my mysterious cavern." And I would just hang up. I finally mentioned it to a few friends and they let me know that there's actually an app that can block calls. So I installed the app and blocked the number. And for another 2 months following that, I'd get a call every single day from a random number, saying the same thing. "I walk your big steel rod deep into my mysterious cavern." I eventually just got a new cell phone number altogether, but there wasn't much I could do about them calling the office, so I made sure to never answer the office phone. So to that creepy guy with his big bunny ear mask, let's not meet.